The small frontier town was restless that afternoon. The sun was hot and sharp, beating down on the wooden roofs and dusty streets. People left their work and came toward the main square, their eyes filled with curiosity. Word had spread quickly that something unusual was about to happen. The sheriff had allowed an auction, and at the center of it all stood a young Apache woman, her wrists tied loosely with a rope. She held her head high even though her face showed signs of weariness. Dust clung to her long dark hair, and her clothing was torn from travel, but nothing could hide the dignity in her eyes. The crowd murmured as they gathered around the wooden platform where she was made to stand. Some looked at her with fear, others with contempt, and a few with pity. In those days, misunderstandings and hostility between settlers and the Apache people were common. To many of the townsfolk, she was not a person with a story of her own, but a symbol of all the fears they carried. They whispered that she was dangerous, untamed, and that whoever took her would need a strong hand to control her. The auctioneer, a man with a wide hat and a booming voice, stepped forward and clapped his hands to get attention. "Gather up, folks. Today we got ourselves something rare. This here woman comes straight from Apache lands. Strong, fierce, and worth every dollar to the man who can handle her." His words drew laughs and whistles from parts of the crowd. The young woman did not flinch. She looked straight ahead, refusing to show weakness. Inside, she felt anger rising, but she stayed silent. She knew that to show fear or rage would only amuse them more. Her father had once told her that silence was a weapon, and she remembered those words now. Bidding began slowly. A rancher offered $10, his grin wide as he elbowed his friend. Another man, smelling of whiskey, shouted 15. Each bid came with laughter, with careless talk of what they would do if they won. To them this was sport, a way to boast about power and money. Then the bids climbed higher. A wealthy merchant wearing a polished vest and shiny boots raised it to 50. The crowd murmured, impressed. $50 for her? Must be he wants to make her work his land, one whispered. Another chuckled. No, he just wants to show her off. Still, the woman's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. She felt trapped, but she would not let them see her spirit break. The noise in the square suddenly quieted when a new voice spoke. It was not loud, yet it carried weight. $100. The people turned. A stranger stood at the back of the crowd. He was tall, dressed in a plain shirt and trousers with a long coat dusted from travel. His hat shaded most of his face, but his posture was calm, steady, and commanding. He did not laugh or smile. He simply looked at the auctioneer with clear eyes. The auctioneer blinked, surprised. $100, you say? He chuckled nervously. That's a mighty high bid, friend. Anyone willing to go higher? The crowd buzzed. $100 was a fortune. Farmers shook their heads. Ranchers muttered that it was too much for any person, let alone someone they believed would cause trouble. The merchant who had bid 50 scowled and raised his hand. 120. The stranger did not flinch. His voice came again, even and steady. 200 gasps filled the air. $200 was more than some families made in a year. The merchant dropped his hand, shaking his head in disbelief. Whispers ran through the crowd like wildfire. Why's he paying so much? One man asked. He's mad, another replied. Mad? No, he must want her for something dark, someone else muttered. No man spends that much unless he means to break her. The auctioneer's grin widened. $200 going once, going twice, sold to the gentleman in the coat. He struck his gavel on the block, sealing the deal. The Apache woman studied the stranger with narrowed eyes as the rope around her wrists was cut. She felt no relief, only uncertainty. Who was this man? Why had he bid so high? The crowd's whispers followed them as the stranger stepped forward, placed the money in the auctioneer's hands, and guided her away from the stage. People stepped aside, staring as the pair passed by. Mothers pulled their children close. Men muttered that they would soon hear cries from the stranger's house. Women shook their heads, whispering that nothing good would come from such a trade. But the stranger's hand on the young woman's arm was steady, not rough. He did not drag her, nor did he boast. He simply walked with quiet purpose. His silence was different from the silence of the crowd. It carried strength, not judgment. The young woman glanced at him once, her suspicion sharp. He met her eyes briefly. For a moment she thought she saw something unusual there. Not cruelty, not greed, but something else she could not name. They walked past the saloon, where laughter and music spilled into the street. past the blacksmith shop where sparks flew as iron struck iron, and past the small church where a bell chimed softly in the distance. All the while, the people of the town kept their eyes on them, their thoughts heavy with assumptions. Finally, at the edge of the square, the stranger paused. He turned to the woman, pulled a small flask from his coat, and offered it to her. She hesitated, unsure if it was a trick. But her thirst was sharp, and after a long moment she accepted. Cool water touched her lips, and for the first time that day, the hardness in her chest eased slightly. The crowd behind them could not see this. All they saw was the stranger leading the woman away, and in their minds the story was already decided. They told each other he had bought her for torment, that no man would pay so much unless his heart was cruel. But the truth was hidden, waiting to be revealed in the days ahead. For now the town was left with its whispers, the young woman with her doubts and the stranger with his quiet purpose. The hot sun sank lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the street, as if the land itself knew that something deeper was unfolding, something far beyond the shallow guesses of the watching crowd. The sun was setting when the stranger finally reached the quiet edge of town, with the Apache woman walking beside him. The dusty noise of the auction faded behind them, though the weight of the crowd's whispers still seemed to follow like shadows. The man's steps were steady, and he did not once turn back. His silence was not the silence of guilt or cruelty. It was the silence of someone who carried heavy thoughts inside. The young woman studied him carefully as they walked. She had expected chains or harsh words, but he gave neither. He did not pull her by force, only guided her path with his calm presence. Still, her heart did not trust easily. She had seen men smile while hiding cruel intentions before. She kept her guard high, waiting for his true colors to show. At last they reached a small cabin standing apart from the rest of the town. The place was modest, with weathered wood and a porch that creaked under his boots. Horses grazed quietly nearby, and the air smelled of pine carried by the evening breeze. It was not the home of a wealthy man, yet it was tidy, cared for, and safe from the gossiping eyes of town. He opened the door and motioned for her to step inside. The Apache woman hesitated. Her pride told her not to obey, but her hunger and exhaustion spoke louder. Slowly she entered. The cabin surprised her. There were no whips, no cages, no cruel tools. Instead, she saw shelves filled with books, a rifle leaning against the wall, a table set with simple dishes, and a bed covered with a clean blanket. A fire already burned low in the stone fireplace, giving the room a warm glow. The stranger untied the rope from her wrists, tossing it aside without a word. She rubbed her skin, surprised at the sudden freedom. He poured water from a jug into a cup and placed it on the table for her. Then, with calmness, he pulled bread from a tin and placed it beside the water. She looked at the food, then at him. Her eyes narrowed. Was this kindness or another trick? The man finally spoke. His voice was quiet, steady. Eat, you need strength. For a long moment she did not move. Then hunger won. She reached for the bread, broke it carefully, and ate slowly. The man said nothing more. He only set about tending to the fire, adding logs with steady hands. The silence stretched, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was thoughtful, as though he was giving her space to decide if she wanted to speak. After a while she asked, her voice sharp and cautious. Why? The man looked at her, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. Why what? Why pay so much? She said, her English accented but clear.
Why take me?
He stared into the fire before answering. Because if I hadn't, someone else would have. And they wouldn't have given you water and bread, she frowned. His answer only deepened the mystery. No man paid such a fortune without a reason. She wanted to press him further, but exhaustion dragged at her limbs. He pointed toward the bed. Rest, tomorrow will be long. Her pride bristled. She wanted to refuse, to show she needed nothing from him, but her body betrayed her. Her legs ached, her eyes burned, and the warmth of the fire made her long for sleep. She chose the floor instead, curling against the wall with her back straight. She would not let herself appear weak. The man said nothing. He left the bed untouched and instead pulled a chair to the far corner, resting against it with his hat over his face. The crackling fire was the only sound that carried through the night. Morning came quietly, with golden light spilling through the cracks in the shutters. The woman woke first, startled to see the man still sitting in the chair half asleep, his coat wrapped around him. He had not touched her in the night, nor had he claimed the bed. Her suspicion trembled for the first time. He stirred awake and went about his morning chores, fetching water, feeding the horses, and preparing oats in a pot over the fire. When he placed a bowl in front of her, she accepted it without words. As the days passed, the townsfolk began to whisper louder. They had seen the stranger walk away from the auction with the woman, but no cries had echoed from his cabin. No cruel laughter had followed. Instead, there was silence, and silence to gossiping tongues was dangerous. At the blacksmith's shop, men muttered, "Something's not right. A man doesn't pay $200 just to let her sit in his house." At the saloon, women whispered, "Maybe he's waiting. Maybe he's hiding something worse." Even the sheriff wondered, though he kept his thoughts to himself. The stranger ignored it all. He took care of his land, bought supplies in town without explanation, and returned quietly to his cabin. The woman remained inside most of the time, her presence like a shadow. Yet slowly her eyes began to catch details she had missed before. On the shelf above the fireplace sat a small carved figure, worn by age but carefully kept. It was the shape of an eagle, carved in the style of her people. She froze when she saw it. How had he come to own such a thing? That evening she asked him, her voice firm, "Where did you get this?" She pointed to the carving. He looked at it for a long time before answering. "A gift, long ago. From who?" she demanded. He met her gaze, his own eyes shadowed with memory. "From a man who saved my life." The woman's suspicion sharpened, but also curiosity stirred. Few men of his kind spoke of the Apache with respect. She wondered what story he was not telling. The man saw her doubt and did not press further. He only said, "When you're ready, I'll tell you more. But not yet." That night she lay awake, staring at the carving, turning his words over in her mind. For the first time since being taken, she felt a strange flicker of something unfamiliar. Hope mixed with confusion. Days blended into one another. The man never raised his voice, never lifted a hand against her, never acted as the town expected. He gave her food, freedom within the cabin, and space. Sometimes when he thought she was not looking, his eyes carried a deep sadness as though he lived under the weight of something long unspoken. The woman began to wonder, had she misjudged him? Was there truly another reason he had bid for her? One afternoon, while she sat near the porch watching the hills in the distance, she caught him packing supplies into a satchel. Water, dried meat, a blanket, and maps. When she asked what he was doing, he only said, "Preparing." "Preparing for what?" she pressed. "Your return," he said simply. Her breath caught. She turned to him, her suspicion battling with shock. "Return to where?" "To your people," he answered as though it were the most natural thing in the world. She stared at him, her chest tight. This was not what she expected. The crowd thought he had bought her to harm her. She herself had believed he wanted to control her, yet his words suggested something different entirely. But trust did not come easily. She narrowed her eyes, her voice low. Why would you do this?" He looked out at the horizon, his face unreadable. "Because once, when I had no reason to live, an Apache elder gave me one. I owe a debt that cannot be forgotten." The woman's heart pounded. She wanted to ask more, but his eyes, filled with quiet honesty, silenced her. For the first time since the auction, she felt her guard begin to weaken just slightly. The evening sun dipped behind the hills, casting the land in gold and shadow. The fire crackled inside the cabin, and the weight of unspoken truths lingered between them. The stranger had revealed only part of his reason, but it was enough to stir a new thought in her heart. Perhaps this man was not her captor at all, but her unlikely protector. The days that followed passed with quiet tension. The Apache woman remained cautious, though her eyes softened at times when she caught the stranger's quiet acts of care. He kept his distance, never raising his hand or voice, but always making sure she had food, water, and a warm fire. He spent hours in silence, sharpening tools, fixing fences, or feeding the horses, while she watched him carefully, waiting for the mask to drop. Yet the cruelty she expected never came. The memory of his words, "Preparing for your return," echoed in her mind. Could it be true? Could he really intend to send her back to her people? It seemed impossible. Men of the town would never spend such money only to let her go free. And yet every action of the stranger hinted at something deeper. One morning she noticed he had laid out supplies neatly on the table: dried meat, a flask of water, a small knife, and a folded blanket. He checked each item carefully, his movements steady and precise. The woman studied him from the corner of the room, her suspicions still strong. "You truly mean it," she said at last. He looked up. "Mean what?" "To send me back," she said, her voice sharp as though daring him to deny it. He nodded once. "Yes, why?" she demanded. "You speak of a debt, but I do not know this debt." "My people do not know you." The man set the knife down and sat quietly, his eyes fixed on the fire. For a long moment he did not answer. Then his voice came low, filled with memory. "Years ago, before this town was built, I was a scout for the army. I believed I was doing right by guiding soldiers through Apache land. But one night things went wrong. A fight broke out near the river. I was left wounded, my men gone. I would have died there." The woman leaned forward, her eyes unblinking. "An elder found me," he continued. "He could have left me there. Instead, he carried me to safety. He fed me, healed me, and told me words I never forgot. You are lost, but you can still find the right path." The stranger's voice grew heavy. "When I was strong enough to leave, I promised myself I would repay him one day. When I saw you on that stage, I knew who you were. His daughter. I could see it in your eyes." The woman's chest tightened. Her father. She remembered him telling stories of showing mercy to outsiders even when it was dangerous. She had thought him foolish at times, but now the truth unfolded before her. This man had been one of those he had helped. Still, trust did not come quickly. "Words are easy," she said softly. "Men use them to hide truth." The stranger did not argue. He simply handed her the small knife he had polished and said, "If you fear me, keep this. If I betray you, you can use it." She looked at the knife in her hand. It was sharp, clean, and real. He had just given her the power to end him if he was lying. No captor would ever do such a thing. That night, the woman did not sleep easily. She sat awake, staring at the knife, staring at the man who rested in his chair again rather than taking the bed. His breathing was calm, untroubled. The firelight flickered against the eagle carving on the shelf, and she thought of her father's words. For the first time since her capture, she wondered if she was truly safe. The next morning, they began to prepare in earnest. The stranger showed her how to tie the blanket into a pack, how to ration the dried meat, how to refill the flask with river water. He spoke little, but his instructions were clear and steady. She listened silently, though her eyes never left his face, searching for cracks in his story. In town, whispers grew louder. Men gathered outside the saloon, shaking their heads. "Something's not right with that one," they said. "He hasn't broken her. He hasn't shown her off. He hides her away like a secret." One of the ranchers sneered. "Maybe he's planning something worse. Maybe he's waiting until no one's looking." Their doubts turned into plans. "We should watch him," one man muttered. "Maybe even take her back ourselves." Unaware of the growing danger, the stranger returned from town with a sack of grain. The woman noticed his shoulders tense when he caught the stares that followed him, but he said nothing. He walked straight back to the cabin, his jaw tight. That evening, while they sat near the fire, the woman finally asked, "Why do you stay alone, away from the others?" The man paused before answering. "Because I no longer belong to their world. They see me as strange, different. They think I waste my life. But I would rather be called strange than live with cruelty in my hands." His words struck her. In her tribe, people were measured by their deeds, not their wealth. She thought of the villagers who mocked him, blind to the truth he carried. Slowly she began to see him not as a captor, but as a man walking a lonely path of his own choosing. Still, trust was fragile. She tested him in small ways, leaving the cabin to see if he would stop her, speaking of her people to see if he would mock them. Each time he surprised her. He never blocked her path, only warned her of dangers in the forest. He never mocked, only listened quietly, as though her words mattered more than his own. One afternoon, while she sat outside, she noticed him carving wood with steady hands. She approached slowly and saw he was shaping another eagle, small and simple like the one on his shelf. When he caught her watching, he smiled faintly. "Your father taught me this. My hands are clumsy compared to his, but it helps me remember." The woman felt her chest tighten. Her father's teachings lived even here, in the hands of this stranger. She wanted to hold on to her anger, but it slipped like water through her fingers. That night, when the fire burned low, she whispered, "If you truly mean to return me, then why wait?" The man lifted his gaze. Because it is not safe yet. Men in town are restless. They watch us. If we leave now, they may follow. We need the right time. She nodded slowly. She did not like waiting, but his words held reason. In the following days, they worked together quietly. He showed her paths through the hills where no one would see. She learned the rhythm of his steps, the way he scanned the land with careful eyes. At night, when the town slept, they sometimes walked under the stars practicing the journey. But danger was closer than either of them realized. One evening, as they returned from the river, the woman caught sight of movement near the edge of the trees. A shadow slipped away too quickly. Her instincts sharpened. "We are watched," she said. The man's face hardened. He nodded once. "Then we must be ready sooner than planned." Inside the cabin, he packed the supplies with firm hands, his eyes sharp with determination. The woman watched him, her doubts finally fading. For the first time, she felt that his strength was not meant to control her, but to protect her. As the fire crackled, she touched the eagle carving on the shelf. Her father's spirit seemed to live in this place, in this man, in this moment. She felt the weight of a truth she could no longer deny. This stranger was not her enemy. He was the bridge between two worlds, carrying both guilt and hope. The night grew deep, the wind whispering outside the cabin. Inside, a plan of rescue was no longer a secret, but a living promise. Both of them knew that the coming days would decide everything: freedom, danger, and the fragile trust that had begun to grow between them. The restless whispers of the town grew louder with each passing day. At the saloon, men gathered in corners, their mugs of beer untouched as they spoke in hushed voices. At the blacksmith shop, workers dropped their hammers to exchange suspicious looks whenever the stranger passed. Even at the general store, where gossip traveled faster than supplies, people muttered behind shelves about the mystery that lived on the edge of town. "He paid $200, one man said, his voice low but sharp. "And for what?" "He keeps her hidden. No show, no work. Just silence." Another leaned in, his face wrinkled with distrust. "Mark my words, he's planning something. No man spends that much money without reason. They say he doesn't let her out," a third added. "What's he hiding?" But the truth was different. Inside the small cabin at the edge of the hills, the stranger and the Apache woman were no longer strangers to one another. Their conversations were brief, their silences long. Yet a fragile bond had begun to take shape. She had tested him again and again, waiting for cruelty, waiting for betrayal. But instead she saw patience. When her ankle twisted on a rocky path, he wrapped it with care. When her voice broke with memories of her father, he listened without interrupting. Each act was simple, but it carried weight far heavier than the cruel assumptions of the town. Still, he carried secrets, and one evening those secrets could no longer stay buried. It was late, the fire flickering low, when she asked again, "Why did you leave the soldiers? Why live alone, away from your own kind?" The man's jaw tightened. He stared at the flames for a long time before answering. "Because I saw too much. And I could not wash the blood from my hands." Her eyes sharpened, suspicion returning. "You fought against my people." He nodded once. "I did. I was young and thought I was serving honor. But I learned honor does not live in orders shouted by frightened men." His voice grew heavy. "I saw a village burn. Women, children. They did not carry weapons. Still the soldiers fired. I could not stop them. I can still hear their cries." The Apache woman felt her chest tighten. She thought of stories told by her tribe, of raids where villages were lost. Her hands curled into fists. "And you? What did you do?" "I tried to stop it," he said quietly. "I pulled one child from the flames. But it was not enough. I left the army that day. I walked away and never returned." His eyes, when they met hers, carried sorrow too deep to fake. "Your father was the one who found me after that. He could have ended me, but he chose mercy. He told me a man is measured not by his past, but by what he chooses next. That is why I live here apart from others. I cannot change what has been done, but I can choose who I am now." For a long time, silence filled the room. The woman's heart battled between anger and understanding. She could see the weight he carried, the truth of his regret. Yet the memory of her people's suffering burned inside her. At last, she whispered, "My father always said mercy was strength. Perhaps he was right. But trust is not given. It must be earned." The man bowed his head. "Then let me earn it." Unseen by them, danger was already moving closer. A group of men had gathered at the saloon that same night, their minds sharpened by jealousy and pride. The merchant who had once bid 50 slammed his fist on the table. I should have won her. Everyone knows it. That man cheated us all. He's hiding something. A rancher leaned forward, his voice low. What if he's making a deal with her people? What if he's planning to turn against us? You know how quiet he's been. Never trusts anyone, never talks much. He's plotting, I tell you. The others nodded. Fear and envy made them blind to truth. In their eyes, the stranger was no longer just strange, he was dangerous. We'll go up there tomorrow night, the merchant said. Drag her out. Show him what happens when a man thinks he's better than the rest of us. The plan was set, and the poison of their words spread through the town like wildfire. Back at the cabin, the Apache woman sensed the change in the air. Her instincts told her danger was near. She spoke to the man the next morning. They watch us more now. Their eyes are sharp like hunters before the strike. He nodded. His jaw tightened as he looked toward the town. I know. That's why we must leave soon. That day he prepared more carefully than before. He checked the rifle leaning by the wall, though he hoped not to use it. He polished the small knife he had given her. He packed supplies with quick, practiced hands. As the sun sank low, he explained his plan. We'll leave at night, follow the river north, then cross through the canyon. It will take days, but the path is hidden. By the time they notice, we'll be too far. The woman listened, her trust still fragile but growing. She could see he meant every word. And though part of her heart longed to doubt, another part whispered that perhaps at last her father's mercy had found its purpose. That evening, the stranger stepped outside to watch the horizon. The wind carried the smell of rain, and the sky darkened with clouds. He felt the storm rising not just in the weather, but in the air of the town. Inside, the woman traced her fingers over the eagle carving on the shelf, the symbol of her father's wisdom. She whispered to herself, perhaps the spirits guide this path. But before they could leave, the storm arrived, not of rain but of men. In the darkness of night, shadows crept through the trees near the cabin. Torches flickered in rough hands, voices whispered in anger. The ranchers and the merchant had come, determined to take what they believed was theirs. The horses stirred uneasily, sensing the threat. The stranger tightened his grip on the rifle but did not raise it yet. He glanced at the woman, his voice steady but firm. Stay close. If they come, we stand together. For the first time, she did not argue. She reached for the knife he had given her, her eyes burning with resolve. She had once seen him as an enemy, then as a mystery. But now she saw him as something more, a man willing to risk everything to keep a promise. The cabin, once a place of quiet safety, now waited like a stage for the truth to unfold. Outside, the men moved closer, their boots crunching on dry leaves, their whispers sharp with hate. Inside, two unlikely allies prepared to face them, not as captor and captive, but as protectors of a fragile bond born from mercy and honor. The storm of men was about to break, and with it the truth of who the stranger really was would be revealed, not only to the woman, but to the world watching in judgment. The night was heavy with silence. The Apache woman stood close to the fire's dim glow, her knife steady in her hand while the stranger watched the shadows outside. The air carried the scent of smoke, but it was not from their fire. Torches moved in the trees, their orange flickers dancing like restless spirits. The men from town had come just as he had feared. The horses neighed nervously, pulling against their reins. The stranger placed a calming hand on one, his face hard with resolve. He knew what those men wanted. They wanted to drag her back into humiliation, to prove their power by breaking both of them. But he would not allow it. Not again. Not after everything. The Apache woman's heart raced, but her spirit was unshaken. For weeks she had doubted this man, but now, standing together on the edge of danger, she felt a strange certainty. He was not her enemy. He was not her captor. He was the bridge her father had spoken of, the proof that mercy could change the course of a life. Voices broke the night. "Come out!" one man shouted, his tone filled with arrogance. "We know you're in there. Hand her over and maybe we'll let you be." The stranger stepped forward, his rifle steady in his hands. He did not raise it yet, but his voice carried across the clearing with calm strength. "She is not yours to take. Go back." Laughter followed, cruel and sharp. "Not ours? She's Apache. She's no one's. You think you're better than us, hiding her away like some treasure? Tonight we'll show you what happens when a man stands alone against his own kind." The woman stepped forward too, her knife flashing in the firelight. "He does not stand alone," she said, her voice strong. The men muttered, surprised to hear her speak. But their leader only spat into the dirt. 2 against 10? You won't last." The stranger's jaw tightened. He whispered to her, "If they rush, stay low. Stay behind me." But she shook her head. "I fight too. My father taught me." The standoff thickened as the torches closed in. One man lunged first, rushing through the clearing with a rope in his hands. The stranger fired once into the air, the sound cracking like thunder. The horses reared and the man stumbled back. The shot had not been meant to kill, only to warn, but the warning carried weight. Still the mob pressed forward, fueled by anger. 2 men rushed at the stranger and he swung his rifle like a staff, knocking one aside. The woman moved quickly, striking the other man's arm with her knife, not to wound deeply but to show she would not be taken without a fight. The crowd roared, their pride stung by resistance. They surged together and for a moment chaos filled the clearing. The stranger fought with steady strength, his movements practiced, not wild. The woman moved with sharp instinct, her father's teachings alive in every step. But numbers pressed hard. The merchant who had once bid 50 grabbed the woman's arm, pulling her back. She twisted, slicing free with her knife, but the struggle weakened her. The stranger saw and tried to push through the mob, but hands grabbed at him, holding him down. It seemed for a moment that all would be lost. Then a sound split the night. A cry, long and fierce, echoing through the hills. The men froze, their faces turning pale. From the shadows of the trees, figures emerged, silent, swift, and strong. Warriors of the Apache tribe. The woman's heart leapt. She knew those faces. Her people had come. The townsmen stumbled back, their arrogance crumbling. The warriors moved like shadows, surrounding the clearing with bows drawn and spears ready. The leader of the mob dropped his torch, his voice trembling. We didn't mean harm. We were only—" His words died as an arrow thudded into the dirt before his feet. The stranger stepped back, lowering his rifle. Relief washed over him, but also a heavy weight. He had kept his promise. He had kept her safe long enough for her people to come. Now perhaps his part in her story was finished. The woman ran toward the warriors, but instead of rushing into their arms, she turned back to the stranger. Her eyes burned with something fierce. "Come," she said. "You must come with us." He shook his head. "This is your homecoming, not mine." But she stepped closer, her voice steady. "You are not theirs," she said, nodding toward the trembling townsman. "And you are not lost. My father showed you mercy once. Now you must see it is not finished. You belong where honor lives." The Apache warriors watched silently, their eyes sharp, measuring the man who stood before them. At last one elder stepped forward. His face was lined with years, his hair streaked with gray. His eyes studied the stranger carefully. "You," the elder said in a deep voice. "I know you. You were the one our chief saved long ago." The stranger bowed his head. "I was, and I have carried his words every day since. I cannot erase what I have done, but I swore I would honor him. Tonight I hope I did." The elder nodded slowly. "You kept his daughter safe when others would have shamed her. You stood against your own kind. That is honor." The townsmen, now desperate, began to slip away into the night. Their pride was broken, their strength scattered. No one would speak of victory for them again. The Apache woman looked at the stranger, her voice softer now. "My father's spirit guided you here. Do not turn away. Walk with us." The stranger hesitated, his eyes on the dark hills beyond. He had lived so long apart, carrying guilt, fearing he could never belong anywhere. But as he looked at the woman and the people who had come for her, he felt something stir deep within, a sense of peace he had not known since that fateful day by the river. At last, he nodded. "I will come." The woman's lips curved into the smallest smile, the first he had seen from her. She reached out her hand, and after a moment, he took it. Together they stepped forward into the circle of warriors. The fire behind them burned low, casting shadows on the cabin that had been their shelter. The storm of men was gone, scattered by the truth of courage and loyalty. The night, once filled with danger, now carried the quiet promise of a new beginning. As they walked into the forest, the stranger knew his journey was not over. It was only changing paths. He was no longer the man who had bought her at an auction, no longer the outsider weighed down by regret. He was a man who had chosen honor, and in that choice he had found belonging. The woman, once thought broken, walked tall beside him. She was not a prize, not a captive, not a shadow of someone else's story. She was her father's daughter, strong and unyielding, and now she carried her own future forward. Behind them the town would tell its tales. Some would whisper that the stranger had betrayed them. Others would say he had gone mad. But none of it mattered. The truth was clear to those who walked into the night together. What had begun as a story of purchase and shame had ended as a story of protection, trust, and redemption. And though the world would never fully understand, the Apache woman and the quiet stranger knew that destiny had bound their paths not for cruelty, but for honor.